Welcome, everyone. Nice to have you here with us. Can you just let me know that you can hear me? So maybe just type in the text chat that you can hear me. Hello, Andrew. How are you, brother? Just let me know. Perfect. And also welcome to Lama and all the others that will be joining us shortly or on the replay. And yeah, I was inspired to share my Vipassana Revelations and just the overflowing of how the practice has changed my life, and just really creating that invitation for others to join this beautiful, how can we call it, community of beings that are practicing together and in our own perfect moments. So just want to welcome you all, and it's beautiful to have you with us as we dive into this exploration today. So, as you know, the presentation is called Vipassana Revelations, and this is a beautiful image I found of Buddha under the banyan tree. So the flow of the presentation today is I'm going to go through a short history. It's going to speak about how Vipassana is not a sect or a religion. It's a universal way of being. Some revelation, talk about the Kalapas particle that Buddha experience within himself, and also proven through science as well, a Nobel Prize winner. And then we're going to speak about this, something that's very, I think, right now in a lot of New Age traditions and other things. And we're in the age of the fake gurus in Kali Yuga. I think this is a really important discernment, is intellectual understanding versus a direct experience. And then we're just going to talk a bit about the postmodern ego and how I witness my ego, and I can, through working with many others on this path and speaking to many others too, learning about the modern day ego and how its afflictions and its response patterns and everything else. And then just speak about how we can daily apply Vipassana in our lives. So I just want to share before we begin that I'm not here to share the technique. I'm just here to share my experience. And everything that's shared is obviously coming through me and my interpretation of it. So I'd always recommend, to receive the purity of the transmission, to always do a sitting, go and do the Vipassana 3-day or 10-day dharma.org, so you can really receive the pure transmission rather than a secondhand of my interpretation and also my revelations that may not always be in alignment with the what comes from Goenka and the teachers trained by Goenka, because many of the teachers as well, it takes 15 years to be appointed a teacher. So it's that longevity of practice is really what unlocks the jewels. So I just wanted to go through some language for today. Vipassana, translated, más o menos, as we say here in Espanol, seeing things as they really are, observing the reality. Dharma, you might hear through this presentation, is the law of nature. Siya is morality. Samadhi, concentration, mastery of the mind. And Panya, wisdom, insight that purifies the mind. Just want to cover the Four Noble Truths, and this is in all Buddhic kind of scriptures and texts. The fact of suffering, the origin of suffering that can come from craving, aversion, misery. The sensation of suffering, and that's the passing of suffering, the transitory nature of life, and then the path leading to the cessation of suffering, and that's that continual practice of where you feel the cessation, and then the cessation takes you deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and there is this beautiful blossoming like the lotus from the mud. So Vipassana, 2,500 years ago, Buddha was taught the technique of Vipassana, and he had dabbled in many other techniques that allowed him to experience samadhi, mastery of the mind, but he knew that it was only a version of samadhi that still had the unconscious, or still had the version. It wasn't the totality of his consciousness. There was still a subtle layer that wasn't being penetrated, and that's why he, after practicing five different type of techniques and paths or something like that, he came across Vipassana, and then he knew that this was the one. And then, during those times in India, at the end there, especially northern India, over like 60 to 70% of the population was practicing Vipassana under the guidance of Buddha. And it was taking India by storm. And obviously the transformation that it was gifting many beings, and beings from all religions would practice Vipassana, because Vipassana is not a sect at all. It's a universal practice, and it doesn't have any rituals, it doesn't have any scriptures, it doesn't have anything, because the practice itself is what brings forth the wisdom. And then it was passed down And King Ashoka, who was originally a king that was very, let's say, tyrannical and quite the kings of those days conquering, and the service of the ego, service of self was very much prevalent. But then he had this moment on his path where he had a realization, and then he opened to the technique of Vipassana through I think he came across Buddha or a story like that. And what happened was he had a complete transformation through this technique. So the most tyrannical king, Ashoka, transformed into a pure being and then completely changed all the laws to represent this new way of living and being. And even on today, still on the there's a stone where it's written the law of King Ashoka, where he speaks about unity for all beings, and that all beings can find their true religion in the space of the heart. So it's a beautiful story, and there's many stories like this in the Vipassana tradition of literally. There's another one where Buddha, there was a murderer known in Buddha's time, and he had murdered 999 people when he had a literally, what would he do when he commit that heinous act? He would take a part of their body and he'd hang it around his neck. And even him came past this technique of Vipassana, and he had a complete transformation, and he was able to heal his inner reality and heal all the sanskaras. And actually, this is a story they tell, was able to get to that state of whatever you want to call it, enlightenment or whatever. So this technique, even in Indian prisons as well, it's being taught. And it's amazing the transformational effects it had. And so after King Ashoka, it was passed down, and these two beings from the lineage and the let's say what's the best word? These two beings from the society, or the spiritual society of King Ashoka, who had learned the technique, were told through transmission that they had to bring the technique into Burma, because the technique had to keep its pristine purity, because it was foreseen that through India it would lose its purity, because beings would receive it and then they would change it because they thought they could practice it better, or they thought that they could make it better. But it's actually in the original transmission and the original teachings of the technique, that's what remained its purity. And then it was passed down in Burma from over 2,300 years, passed down, kept in its pristine purity, not changed, through these masters, Ledi Sayadaw, Saya Threat Guy, and then finally down to Saya Uba Kin, and then passed to Goenka. And Goenka is the being now who died, I think 2012, 2013, who has brought this to the world. And it's amazing to witness that there are centers all around the world that are run purely by donation. And that just shows the power of this technique, is that whoever practices it or retains the practice of it just comes into this giving state. And I haven't heard of anything in the world that's spread this far and is still running like this. So it's a beautiful thing for me as well. My second practice here in Mexico, I was able to go, and again, it's all by donation. And obviously, from doing the technique, you want to give, but it's amazing that just the charity and the goodwill that this technique comes with. Yeah, and this is an important thing that's kind of shared from the start. Vipassana is not a sect. It's not a religion. It is not a ritual. It is anyone of any religion can practice this technique. It's just a technique one can practice. And what comes from it, Dharma is universal, nature is nature, the truth is the truth. And, under Vipassana, no religion is better than any other, And when you do Vipassana, you give yourself to the practice without dogma. So it's advised that you don't do any rituals or anything else, so you can give full attention to the practice. And they speak about this in one of the transmissions of Goenka. He talks about how all religions are just elephants. They're elephants. It's just people touching different places of the same elephant. One's saying, oh, this is a trunk, it feels like this. One's feeling the tail and says it's like this, but they're all touching the source of truth. And it's very important as well that shared in this practice is that you are your own liberator and savior. There's no one that can do that for you, no one that can clear your karma, no one that can give you a transmission or the Shakti part and you're liberated. None of that. And Buddha, there's many examples and stories of beings that came to Buddha with that type of approach, and every time he would accurately respond to show that being that, that is not the way here and not the path, is that you have the responsibility for your own enlightenment, liberation, or whatever your heart longs for. So this is a mix of my internal realizations and what they share. So I think one of the keys in life as well, in this technique, is you observe the reality of what you're experiencing as it is, not how you would like it to be. Even in life, sometimes when situations happen or think we're going through initiations or unfoldments, the mind always wants to observe how it should be or how that should have unfolded or whatever the situation. But if you just embrace as it is, how is it? How is it? Embrace as it is. So however that experience it is, yes, the mind can have a million different analytical perpetrations of it, but how is that? What is the reality of it as it is? And the more you practice this technique, you develop that ability to ascertain that. And it's through the power of neutrality. Obviously, when things happen to us in life or when we're going through this technique and we experience some very deep sanskaras in our being, inside of our body through sensations, absolutely, we have those kind of those kind of effects or reactions to it. But as we learn more and more through this technique, the power of neutrality, when you can be neutral or equanimous with a sensation, with an experience in life, then it allows transmutation to occur. Or as they say, when you're able to hold neutrality, even if there was an example of me in meditation, I was having this very strong visual of this heinous thing happening in a past life. And, we can have all the reactions in the world because it was me that was doing it. But if we can hold neutrality, then it transmutes, it eradicates. So I had many of those type of powerful experiences of initially, the mind wants to react through a certain way, but as you get deeper into the unconscious and the subconscious, then you can begin to purify how you react to situations at the deepest level of your mind. The power of noble silence, and this is for the 10-day retreat, you have 9 days of silence, and you really come into this kind of space of how powerful silence is, because you understand how much energy is wasted through the spoken word, and sometimes also how the unconscious creates the spoken word or co-creates the spoken word. So you really come into this understanding of, wow, the power of the tongue, the power of the spoken word, abracadabra. As I speak, I create. And this is why you may have heard of many stories that, like the Taoist sages, or they didn't speak too much because they knew that any word spoken would take away from the purity of their experience. It's like the word spoken before the word even comes into word. And that's the language of silence. So this is a beautiful type of thing you kind of start to experience. Developing the faculty to experience enlightenment within the framework of the body. And this is so important these days, I feel, because it's very grounding, because there's so much now in New Age, Ascension Glossary, light language, star seeds, all of this, where you're in other dimensions, or you're calling in other things, or doing activation and visualizations and all of this. And, it really takes it back that through this practice is that any experience is truly happening within the framework of this body. And this is what you have to work with. You have to work with this temple. And through working with this temple, that is the path. And anything that is, any sanskara, anything that needs to be transformed, transmuted, and it is in the body somewhere. It's manifested in the body, maybe on a layer that we can't access at this moment in time, because there is dense layers and subtler layers. And this is what the practice of Vipassana is. It's literally a surgery of your body, because you observe the sensations in the body, and then you slowly, subtler, and you go to subtler levels of the sensations, and they're directly connected to the mental conditioning. And then you slowly and subtler sensations, that correlate with subtler aspects of samskaras, or things, mental impurities. And then you observe it with neutrality. And it's a beautiful experience, because you just know that everything that you need to heal and clear is right here. It's right here. It's very grounding, very grounding. And as you delve with this technique more, you understand the mind and matter phenomenon and the connection between mind and matter. And this goes into quantum physics as well. And many of you might know the double slit test, of where the awareness is creating the reality through that connection between mind and matter, between that connection of awareness and particles. When awareness is not on particles, they disappear. They don't disappear, but they don't have the same patterning. They go back into a non-awareness spin ratio. So that's a very interesting relationship, and Buddha talks about that a lot, and so does Goenka. So this was a beautiful share from the satsangs and the Dhamma talks. Awareness and equanimity go hand in hand, like a bird's wings, equally soft, light, but strong enough to fly. So this is the core of the technique, is awareness through the dense sensations to the subtle sensations, and having equanimity for those sensations and what they manifest as well. Sometimes they manifest as really intense images. Sometimes they manifest as really subtle sensations. However they manifest, and observing them as they are, not how you'd like them to be. Another one, awareness and equanimity, or neutrality, I prefer, go hand in hand. Wheels on a cart, equal in design and strength. So the equal in design and strength of the wheels of the cart really create that structure for it to be able to move the cart. So the core of the technique of Vipassana is you're changing the behavior pattern at the deepest level of the mind. And when I practiced this, I experienced this. I started to experience the deepest core level of my mind, how my response patterns in life were being manifested, like it was happening at the deepest level, and I didn't even know it was happening. And this comes back with more science that shows sometimes the unconscious reacts 3 seconds before the actual mind is even comes into cognition. So you're doing deep mental surgery here. And there were many, especially in my relationship with the Shira, there were many triggers that were coming on such a rapid space, a rapid fire, and such a deep level of the mind. And that's why they will keep happening again, again, and again, and again, because they were coming from such a deep place. And, I use the EFT technique to release emotions and to work with triggers, but I wasn't able to penetrate to the depth of the level of the mind. So for me, and I guess everyone has their own way of processing and delving deep. It doesn't have to be through Vipassana, it can be through EFT. And I know through Ashira, she goes this deep with that technique, but it's really down to you. And often this is what is shared, is often we're addicted to the sensation. That's the truth, not the alcohol, not the drugs, not the reaction pattern. It's the sensation. And what is spoken about is that Buddha speaks about this, is that the unconscious is actually conscious, but it's conscious because it automatically reacts with aversion, suffering, or misery, or craving. It automatically reacts. So it is very conscious, but it is not so. It's conscious in a way that it's not serving our highest alignment and highest path. But that's the thing, it is conscious, but we have to develop the aperture to be able to observe, because it's happening at the unconscious is happening, or we'll call it the unconscious, is happening at the most subtle level of our being. So we have to develop the aperture to shine light on that and have the awareness to understand where it's coming from. So that's part of this. The power of this practice is that you can begin to do that deep mental surgery, the deepest level of your mind, and change the unconscious patterning that is firing those neural nets or suffering, the aversion. And that's the thing. The ego is addicted to suffering. It's addicted to these response patterns because it creates its identity. It wants to be identified through something, and that's why it craves, because it's creation. From the ages of 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, when our mental aperture is developed, that's where it's truly identified. So at those ages, it's created that identification, and it's created through, maybe when you're 3 years old, whatever happens, that feeling or that suffering or that aversion or craving, that's the sensation that's experienced, because at those times also our mental aperture is not fully online. So that's the sensation that we are addicted to, because that creates the ego construct. And this is an interesting, this is one of the noble truths, and I feel that it's very deep, because I think it's a very deep level of, all of life is suffering, and even at the celestial Brahmic planes of existence. And, the sages also talk about this too, is where unless you're in that full absorption and connection to the Godhead, or whatever you want to call it, Brahman, Tao, that is the only way that you are free from suffering, because you feel that pulsation or that ecstasy of whatever word you want to call it, love. And I haven't experienced that. Again, this is an intellectual understanding. So I've had my own subtle experiences of that, but definitely not a full-blown going insane with love. Yeah, this is one of the techniques, anicca, and it's the changing nature of particles. In every moment, particles are changing and shifting, and as we observe these, you can literally observe it within your being as you develop your aperture. You can observe in any moment, you can feel the particles shifting and changing. And this is also through science. They talk about every 7 years, our complete cellular structure has died and is being reborn. So you've done Vipassana. So she said, I remember from my last 10 days. Yeah, it's mentioned all the time, anicca, the ever-changing nature of consciousness or nature. So I just want to share the sit of determination. So on day 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that, you sit in the same position without moving. You don't do it in terms of torture, but you do it as an act of determination, as an act of bravery, as an act of valor. And I witnessed within my being how I was able to develop my mental strength through doing this. And it was very powerful. And I was able to delve deeper into the unconscious aspects of my consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, through sitting longer. So it's very powerful to sit longer without moving, because you're able to delve deeper and deeper, because the ego doesn't want you to go into these realms and depths. So it will create distractions and aversions. And it's amazing also when you're, because it takes a while for us to be able to sit. Maybe we practice yoga or we just observe the sensation, but the pain goes down. And because most of it is mental pain. So that's powerful. And this is why, the yogis, you always see them sitting for hours with no tension, because they have cleared that tension from their body. Because again, everything is manifested in our body. Everything is manifested. All our samskaras, everything is manifested. You can call it the fascia or the meridians or what in the nadis. It's all in this framework. It's all here, and maybe there's more subtle layers of that, but it's all through this framework. So you're the manifestation of all of it. So that's why this practice really takes you there. And this is what we're going to go through now, is the speed of the particles, and this is the mind matter, really creates the delusion of matter. And we already know through quantum physics now, the latest quantum physics, they talk about 98% or 99% of all matter is actually not matter. So they talk about this, the vibratory nature, that's just it's like the candle flame, for example. We look at it and it's actually coming in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out before we even see it. Same with the light bulb. If we could slow down the speed of the particles, we would see it's coming in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. It's fasting. It's moving quicker than our awareness can cognitize. And this comes back now to Kalapa. So this is what Buddha experienced within himself, and this was the Kalapa particle. And the smallest units of physical matter said to be about a particle of dust from the wheel of a chariot. So this is what Buddha observed inside himself. This is like the linchpin of the mind-matter connection. And once you get to this state, then who knows what happens, oblivion. So this is just showing. And then there was a scientist called Murray Gell-Mann in 1963 who won the Nobel Prize, and he found this particle within creation. Buddha found it within himself, and it arises and vanishes at, I don't know how much, what that is, 1 trillion billion times a second. And this is just, again, talking to the impermanence. It too shall pass. This is the alchemist is saying, because the impermanence of existence, of nature, of everything. And that's why to be fully alive is to just know that everything's ever changing in every moment, and to not cling. And this is coming from a very theoretical space, but when you experience it within yourself, then it changes. It changes the mental interpretation. And this is the thing, direct experience versus intellectual understanding. And it's funny, they told a story that this scientist actually came to realize that the Buddha had found this particle within himself. And then this scientist went to sit in Vipassana and quit after day 2. So it just shows you can intellectually understand something, but then there is the purification, or there's the experience within the body. And that's the difference. The Nobel Prize winner, after 2 days, couldn't sit anymore. So this is kind of showing the difference here. And true wisdom comes from direct experience within the body. And it's something that you experience, not something you've read, the scriptures and everything else. And this is why Buddha would always be approached by pundits, masters of scripture. And he wouldn't say it, and he would be a master. He's like a Zen, what they call in Zen, accurate response. Because he was abiding from a place of pure consciousness, he would know the response perfect to every situation. And then it's not coming from mind, it's coming from direct transmission. And this is why these days there's so much distortion out there, because there is so much text, techniques, let's say, I don't know what else to call it, light language, star seeds, this and that. And it's just like most of it is intellectual understandings, dimensions and other things. And it's not truly embodied or experienced within the body. It's something that is understood. And then therefore, from the mental aperture, we create it through our consciousness. And then at some level, we're experiencing it on the level of the mind, but it's actually so far away from the reality of our being that we get stuck in this spiritual ego, that we get stuck in this false reality. And then it takes a huge karmic slap to bring us out. I experienced that myself. And this is even with blind devotion as well. They're all happening on the surface level of mind. And this is the teachings, is witnessing the sensations objectively with equanimity, penetrates the different depths, the deepest depths of the mind, experience the whole universe within the framework of the body. That is the taskless task. And this is again funny, because this is all intellect as well, because I haven't experienced this, but this is the share. The only way out is in, and no one can do it for you. So they talk about this, the 3 kinds of wisdom gained by listening to others, intellectual analytical understanding, and wisdom based on direct experience. Now, this is the one that you want to cultivate, is wisdom based on direct experience within your body, and therefore it can be also transmitted to others, because wisdom gained by listening to others or intellectual is just at the surface level of the mind. Wisdom based on experience is at the deeper layers and deeper levels, coming into also the super consciousness. And that's the old saying, know thyself. Across all mystery schools and traditions, nosce te ipsum, is knowing thyself through the... I was just going to turn the light on, actually. 1 second. That's better. Light is on, but no one's home, because I just realized I was in the dark. So, know thyself. Again, that direct experience is what we're speaking to. Okay. The light is on, but no one is home. Okay, accurate response. Now, this is a very beautiful... it's something that you can observe and read about, that the Zen masters, for example, would always have this insane accurate response to every situation. Or the Taoists talk about Wu Wei, the sage acts by doing nothing, and that's when they come to this state that it's the transmission of God that's moving through them to act to a certain situation. And because that consciousness is the same consciousness that is orchestrating the situation, then it is accurate because the consciousness is playing out a certain situation. And in every situation, there is the perfect response to be in alignment or be a bodhisattva or teach or show someone or show the one, as St. Francis of Assisi says, the one you're looking for is the one that's looking. It really creates that non-dual response to a situation, which is mind-blowing. And this is, and we also have this kind of thing with spirituality these days that like love and light and everything is beautiful and in the of love and light, but also in the case of Buddha sometimes and many Zen masters and things, sometimes the accurate response is something fierce. So there's stories about Zen masters that would slap their students, but we could interpret that of, but again, that when they're in such a pure transmission, there is, in every situation, there's an unfoldment that is best for the best result for that being. And that really comes from a space of calmlessness and inner anchoring, which this technique brings you closer and closer to. And, it is a journey. Many of the teachers, for example, practice for 15 years before they're even a teacher. And that's just, it doesn't have to be 15 years. Everyone's journey is unique, but that's just a sharing on that. And there's many stories. There's one story I'll just cut to the chase. There's a woman with a dead son that comes to Buddha. Can you resurrect my son? Can you resurrect my son? And he tells her to go get a bucket and put rocks in it and a bucket and put like a powder in it. And I'll meet you at the lake. And then she puts the bucket with rocks in it and the bucket goes to the bottom. And she puts the bucket with the powder in and the powder, it floats or the powder comes to the top. And he said, that's nature is nature. I can't do anything. The bucket that went to the bottom of the ocean through the rocks, that's nature. So there was that one. And then there was this story about the Brahmins in those days. They were having a lot of fights with Buddha. Well, they were having a fight because a lot of people stopped practicing rituals and coming into this beautiful state of awareness and being from not doing the rituals and the worshipping of gods and goddesses and everything else. And the Brahmins organized this woman to try to seduce Buddha, but obviously it never worked. And she told stories that they had, had sex. And many years later, she came back to a thing, and she put a fake lump in her stomach that Buddha had. It was Buddha's child, and she addressed in front of this huge crowd with like the prime minister or anything. She went to Buddha and she yelled out, "I am the bearer of your son," or whatever. And this is from a huge crowd. And Buddha just answered with such calmness and purity that it wasn't the response she was expecting. And then it automatically put her into a different state. And then this kind of contraption she made to show that she was pregnant, it broke. And then in front of everyone, she was seen as a fraud. And then she asked for forgiveness in front of everyone. And then there's many stories of Brahmins coming and abusing Buddha. And we'll go to the next slide. And they were just so perplexed by his calmness. You're being abused, you're yelling for hours, and this being is just like staying in this neutrality. And this is what he said. Dear brother, suppose you give me some coins to somebody. If he does not accept them, then whom will these coins remain? And that's the same as like all the anger, all the projections, all the nonsense that was spoken to Buddha. Buddha didn't accept any of it. And then it doesn't go, it's not a transaction, it stays with that person. So they're only intensifying their own anger, their own greed, their own aversion, their own suffering. And that's the power of neutrality. It's the ultimate transmutation. And I feel that's a very deep, obviously a very deep state of being where you're just in complete neutrality. And when things come at you, you can just not accept them. And then they remain with the person who's projecting. So that's kind of a beautiful teaching. 4 qualities of pure mind. Now, important, this was a thing between Confucius and Lao Tzu as well, because Confucius was about cultivating these practices, like from a mental level. But Lao Tzu said, you can't cultivate these practices. They come and they arise upon themselves as you begin to purify, as you begin to open the heart, or whatever you want to call it. And it's funny, many people say, because there's Gautama, Gao in Chinese is Lao. So there's many theories that Lao Tzu was actually Buddha as well. They're the same person, and Buddha wrote the Tao Te Ching as well. So that's an interesting theory as well. And this is just being weaved in here. So these are the 4 qualities of pure mind as shared from Buddha. Metta, selfless love; karuna, compassion; mudita, sympathetic joy; and upekkha, which is equanimity. And this is also the root of how he was always able to give accurate response from a situation, because he was coming from these qualities of the mind, this love, compassion, joy, equanimity. So he was able to transmit always. And that's why so many people would, they'd argue or they'd express things to Buddha, and he'd find the perfect way to allow that person to come into their own understanding, or their own realization of what's truly happening, that they're projecting or they're creating a false reality. And it was just a beautiful practice of Buddha to do that. Now, I feel that these days, back in those days and days before, we were dealing with a completely different ego to the ego we have today, because the ego that we have today is being, let's say, programmed by a more, let's say, fallen consciousness of a collective consciousness. And we have technology, we have, for example, for men, porn programming, that's just, at 13, 14, 12 is just stifled in. And many of my brothers as well, through the experience, were purifying that programming, such deep programming from pornography. And that goes into that instant gratification and creates neural nets and dopamine and other things that you are just always being gratified. And just the nature of the Western world, that is a reflection of that fallen consciousness, creates and sustains this postmodern ego, and the intense stimulation and the numbness. And that's why often when we start Vipassana, we have very dense sensations in our body, because that's the numbness of what we've. And that's not to say that, because we have dense sensations, that we are to be, looked down upon. That's just the nature of reality as it is. And then we have mental projection fields as well. And I experienced this with it myself as a child. I wasn't taught how to express my emotions. I was, don't cry, don't cry, don't yell, don't whatever. And then the way that I processes my emotions, I created an internalized mental projection field that actually was, again, you have the reality, and then you have this mental projection field that you've created from childhood. And it's a barrier, you have the situation, you have your mental projection field, and then you have the reality. So I created many of these mental projection fields as a child, because I didn't know how to deal with my emotions. So I projected them into a mental field. So it's amazing as you dive deeper and you realize many of these things. And the monkey mind is so trained through society, it's constant stimulation, ads on TV or whatever, like always the next thing that you're listening to the radio, there's an ad or whatever it is. It's the monkey mind is trained that there always has to be a stream of thoughts after another stream of thoughts, because the ego is lonely and it creates thoughts, constant thoughts, to prove its illusionary existence. And sometimes also when you're doing this practice, it will put something forth to distract you, some of the most random thing, maybe from when you were 16 at a dance party, some random memory. It will bring up anything to distract you from neutrality in the presence. And then it will plan out a unfoldment of thoughts to take you away from it. And this is definitely how my ego has interrupted the silence. I'm sure we all have unique egos and how they've been co-created through childhood, parental, ancestral, everything else. So that's a little thing on the postmodern ego and why it's even harder, I can't say for everyone, for us these days. And that's why often these techniques, you only receive the jewel of the lotus on the longevity of practice, because the layers have been so intensified and reinforced by society, programming, systems, the financial system, the family system, all the systems. You get what I'm speaking about. So Vipassana in daily life, and even since I've come back, I've retained my practice. I do about 45 minutes in the morning because I do other practices as well of Vipassana at night, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, again, because I do other things, because I really feel it's about finding what really works for you. And for me, I do a mix of Vipassana, do my Vipassana finish, and then I do a Kriya from Paramahansa Yogananda, and then I will do some movement and other things. So you'd really have to tune in what works for you, and you'll find what works for you. And just this practice already, just the deeper layers of awareness through the practice, I've experienced my triggers have come up since I've been back, and I've been able to catch myself in the trigger and then breathe through it and regain awareness, because as many of you might know, it's always reflected a reaction through your breathing pattern, because it instantly changes. So that's again the breath, and this is what the first technique we learn, Anapura, is just the connection between breath and mind, breath and mind, breath and mind, and breath and mind, and neutrality. So yeah, I've caught myself when I've been triggered through life, coming back through the anapana, breathing, and then just coming back into neutrality. And this actually works as well, as sometimes I've been triggered in situations and I'll just ask to be excused, or in the moment, if it's just with me, I will just sit and then concentrate the mind and then observe where the trigger is in my body, because again, everything's within the framework of the body. So observe where it's here. Okay, let's keep observing. And as we keep observing with neutrality, it shifts and changes and begins to eradicate and transmute. And I've experienced, I've had more energy, I'm sleeping better, and there is often more consistency throughout the day with clearer and more decisive action. So if you're feeling inspired, I'm just going to take this moment now to invite you to do a 3 or 10 day sit. And dharma.org for more details. Again, there are centers all around the world that are run through donation, which is incredible. And your first sit is also, you don't have to donate on your first sit. And that kind of gives you that freedom as well to decide, does this technique change my life? It really comes from a very beautiful space, because then it comes from the uplifting of your heart to donate and give. spontaneous share in my experience. I just wanted to throw that in there. I feel for me, I've been meditating for 10 plus years, many different techniques. And actually, when 2017, when I first did my Vipassana sit, I was very ungrounded. I was just coming out of a huge initiation with the Institute of Divine Potential, coming into realization of a lot of falsities and things I didn't resonate with anymore. And when I first received it, I wasn't fully grounded to receive the purity of the transmission of what is being transmitted. So this time coming back again, I was able to receive it from a completely different angle, and it really hit home. And there were so many, also from 2017 to now, there were so many levels of my mind that I hadn't penetrated to yet. Even in plant medicine ceremonies, I've done many plant medicine ceremonies. I was only on the surface level of many of these things. So it enabled me to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I'm very grateful that I was able to penetrate into this space, and now continuing practicing to continue that. And I'm definitely taking the vow now of doing it once a year for many years. So yeah, it was transformational for me big time, and just already seeing the shifts in my life, and also the direct clarity in my life too. Things had been quite stagnant here in Mexico for me. I'm living in this place called Amadlandi Quetzalcoatl, and it's a very potent energetic portal. You feel like you're in a vortex, and things have been a bit stagnant. And yet, just in Vipassana, I received such clarity on my next steps, visceral clarity. So now I'm moving back home to Australia, and that feels so good. And that was just a direct transmission. And that's the thing, you receive direct transmissions through the depth of your awareness as well. So if you're going through something in life and you don't know the next steps, another beautiful way to receive direct transmissions. That's me. And also I did it on the eve of my 33rd birthday as well, because I felt that there was more, because I speak about the age of 33 and the importance of those internal geometries to be in alignment so you can... yes, Costa Rica, definitely a vortex as well. I spent 7 months there. So I'm going to a place that's more vortex neutral. For now, my time of vortexes are complete. Let's say that. Although Adelaide is built on a quartz network, but I feel that because I've lived most of my life there, my energetic structure has more been, let's say, alchemized to it. And also, I'm very connected to the originals, as we call them in Australia, the indigenous, and it's in my bloodline. So walking the earth there feels so much. But also walking the earth here in Mexico feels so, in Peru and everywhere else. But there's just something in this lifetime where Australia is that place. Now, this is another upspring, or the, let's say, what's the word? My heart on fire is I would love to offer meditation sittings. I just really felt this for beings that are working on their meditation, or want guidance with their meditation, or just want to meditate together. I've made this available now on my website on School of Modern Mystics. You can go on to Gabriel and you can see Dana offerings, and we can meditate together. I'd love to meditate, and yeah, it's a donation, any amount you feel inspired to give. So if that's something that you want to work with or work on, you can more than here's my invitation to you to get in contact, and we can sit together in meditation. So that is the presentation today. Thank you so much to Catherine and Lamar, and there was Andrew, and there was a few others that came in and came out, and there's all the people also that will watch the replay, and I will send that through. So blessings and love to you all. If any of you actually end up doing Vipassana after watching this video, please share that with me. I'd love to hear your story and how that unfolded for you. And yeah, I'm just going to send my love and blessings. Thank you all for being with me today. And metta to you. And yeah, it's been beautiful spending this time together. And I'll just ask if there are any questions. Also, anyone wants to ask anything, we can do that. Just wait a few moments. Pour myself to my tea. Lamar, what you can do is you can just go book a meditation together, and we can sit together. Just yeah, I think it's from my Mexico City from 5:30 a.m. till 9 a.m. Any of those times, I'm up early. I like to catch the hour of Shiva, as they call it. Not quite the hour of Shiva, because they say it's from 3:30 to 4:30, but there was only 7 months of my life where I was in that practice of getting up at that time. But I was living in an ashram in Costa Rica, so it made it a much, let's say, yeah, when you're just in complete devotion and doing your seva, you're at a different level. But I'd love to integrate that again at some point in my life to the 3:30 get-ups. Oh, beautiful. 1 hour difference. So yeah, just under Gabriel on the schoolofmodernmystics.com. You have Dana offerings, and then there's a link for Meditate with Gabriel. And yeah, we can do that. All right, beloveds, if there is nothing else, I'm wishing you a beautiful night, evening, afternoon, morning, or whenever you receive this. And I don't know if you've seen, we've had the beautiful Anandamai Ma just above us as well, who's been here through this transmission. Another beautiful, beautiful being that I deeply resonate with. And maybe one day we'll do a presentation on her and how she's also came into my life. And just as it's funny, I just did a wisdom class on the lost lineage of the Lion Kings, and yeah, in that wisdom class, I talked about Buddha, and it's funny that he was the oldest imprint of the lion and the acts of nobility, and a lot of his teachings are around the lion's roar, the lion, and yeah, he was the imprint of that whole presentation of this lost lineage of the lion quality. And one of the lion qualities is also the noble silence, and the nobility is the key quality of the lion. And we go into that in the presentation, but it's funny how from that, then I went to do a Vipassana. It's kind of like this beautiful sequencing of events that are done in no time. I'm sure many of you have had those experiences of just like this perfection. It's like sometimes we're living in a dream of unfoldment, and it's like, yeah, it's like we're all actors on the stage in the divine play. Let's just say that. All right. Lots of love to everyone. Metta, may all beings be happy.